Thank you for tuning in to Macro View Television, and welcome to a brand new edition of Taiwan Outlook, the program that presents the different faces and lets you hear the different voices on Taiwan. I'm your host, Ray Guo. Have you ever traveled to Africa, particularly the country of Mozambique? What is the current state of bilateral relations between Taiwan and Mozambique? We're going to find out on today's program because we're delighted to have Mr. Achilles Yeh, who's currently the representative of Mozambique Investment Promotion Center in Taiwan, to be our special guest and talk about the kinds of opportunities available in trade, investment, and tourism. Welcome to our program, Mr. Yeh.
Hi there. Hi, everyone.
Yes. Well, it's a delight to have you on the program, Mr. Yeh. And we're going to start off today's program by asking you, Mr. Yeh, tell us a little bit about yourself, because we understand that you have lived overseas for many years and you have studied in a number of different places. And tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Okay. I'm Achilles, and I was actually born in Taiwan.
Yes.
And then at a very young age, my family immigrated to South Africa.
Good.
And then so I did my primary school and middle school in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And then around the year of 97, 98, my family immigrated again to Mozambique.
Okay.
And then we've been living in Mozambique ever since then.
Good.
And then I was very honored to go to a very special college in Swaziland for 2 years to do my international baccalaureate degree. And it's a United World College, and it's the only UWC in Africa. And then from there, I went to Canada for my undergrad for 4 years.
Okay.
And studied political science. And then after that, I got my graduate degree from Holland in the University of Leiden. Good. And then after that, I worked for a couple of years in Mozambique. And that's where I met my first encounter of Taiwan, actually, is in Mozambique.
Really? I
was assisting on translation for a delegation from TAITRA, the Taiwan External Trade Council for promotion. Mm-hmm. And then that's where I first encountered Taiwanese businesses operating overseas, and especially in Africa. So it really made a good impression. And a few years later down the line, and then here I am here today.
Here you are, okay. And you don't retain much memory of Taiwan since you left at the very early age.
I was very fortunate because actually my grandparents came to live with us.
Oh,
so I also learned to speak Taiwanese with my grandparents.
Good for you.
So actually I'm illiterate in Mandarin, and because I can read, but I can't write.
Okay.
So, and in Mozambique, we speak Portuguese, it's the official language. Okay. And then when I was in South Africa, I went to Afrikaner English primary school. So I also learned Afrikaans and English as my first mother language.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. And tell us a little bit about the country of Mozambique, because like I said at the beginning of the program, most of us, if not all of us, probably heard of the country, but never been to Mozambique. Tell us a little bit about it.
Actually, if you look at Africa in general, most people know about Madagascar from the cartoon. And actually Mozambique, we're just right across.
Okay, the channel?
The channel, the Mozambican channel.
Okay.
Mozambique, it's a very huge, in terms of a land proportion to Taiwan, it's 22 times.
Really?
It's about
a huge country.
800,000 square kilometers in terms of area size.
All right.
And then the population's about 25 million. Just a bit more than Taiwan.
Yes, but they have such a huge land.
It's a huge, and then it's got a very long coastal feature. It's it's on the east coast of southern Africa continent.
Okay.
So we're bordering on the north with Tanzania, and then with Malawi, with Zimbabwe, Zambia, Swaziland, and South Africa.
Okay.
So. And Mozambique, it's a very important country on the east coast of Africa because we are the export-import outlets for all the landlocked countries in Central Africa.
Yes.
For example, all the way down from Malawi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Swaziland, and Mozambique serve as an import-export coast for the goods
port of
coming.
entry.
Yeah, port of entry, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about your current line of work, because we understand that, Mr. Yeh, you are the first representative of any Mozambique, agency, especially in the area of trade and investment. You are now the representative of Mozambique Investment Promotion Center in Taiwan. Tell us a little bit about your office, the kinds of functions that you perform for people who are interested in Mozambique, and the kinds of events and activities that you have prepared for the business community in Taiwan. Please.
Okay, so basically I was appointed by an agency called Centro de Promoção de Investimentos in Portuguese.
Okay.
It's basically investment promotion center in English.
Okay.
And it's an agency under the Ministry of Planning and Development.
Okay.
So this agency is responsible for all the foreign direct investments into Mozambique.
Okay.
And then it's an integration agency that integrates vertically and horizontally between private and public sector, and also to assist in foreign direct investment. And then we have basically working under 3 pillars. The first pillar is to promote investment opportunities, and to seek and to identify industries that is essential and vital. And then secondly is to assist and to provide service for foreign direct investment big projects. For example, a lot of these foreign direct mega projects that's established in Mozambique, and we have to assist with all the facilitating, including registration and then project revisions, and then assisting monitoring programs, and also to identify obstacles and try to overcome all the obstacles, and liaison through different ministries of from the government side, and providing licensing, for example, work permits, and to also deal with legal issues and also finance transaction issues. And then my line of job here in Taiwan is also guided by these 3 pillars here. It's also to identify certain industries in Taiwan which is beneficial for Mozambique.
Yes.
And then the trade is actually both ways. It's bilateral. So that means there's certain procurement items from Taiwan, and there's also certain procurements from Taiwan from Mozambique.
Yes.
So it's a trade relation on both sides. It's a two-way traffic, yeah.
Yes. But let me ask you, Representative Yeh, a lot of people might have heard of, the country of Mozambique. But when you go up to them and say, Mr. So-and-so, I represent the Mozambique, the Trade Promotion or Investment Promotion Center, and you're welcome. Your company is welcome, to come to Mozambique and explore the opportunities. What is their general reaction, usual reaction?
In the beginning, it causes quite obvious confusions because I was not native-born African, obviously.
Of course, yes.
And this first thing happened when I went to Canada for my university, my first experience. Because when I went to Canada, the university actually sent the African club to come and receive me from somebody from Mozambique.
Of course.
So they're expecting somebody that's African, of course. And then when they received me, they were really confused because I never attached my photo with my applications. And then on the Taiwan side, in the beginning, it also causes some confusions. But it also took me a while to kind of settle in and also let people to adjust to my mentality, because for me, it's still it's quite a culture shock. Although because I only know the culture of Taiwan
through your family,
through my family, but living here is a different story.
Of course.
And a lot of in terms of business cultures and lots of protocols and different etiquettes and different mentalities. It's I think it's a give and take. And then for me, I think Mozambique culture, it's a very easygoing culture. It's not as expected as you see in neighboring other African countries. And this has to do a lot with its colonial history, for example. Lots of people misunderstand Africa as a whole continent, but actually Africa, it's a huge piece of land. The land mass is North and South America all combined together. And if you see the distance between, for example, Hong Kong to Johannesburg, you have to fly maybe 10 hours. But from Cape Town to north of Africa, it also takes 10 hours of flight. So people usually underestimate the size of the continent itself. So, and also for Mozambique, to Taiwanese people, people only remember its civil war back in the days. And then
pretty much.
Yeah, and then the country, it's recently booming in terms of economy.
Yeah.
In terms of energy resources. So my office here serves as a bridge and a gateway for both countries.
All right.
And then, although we don't have any diplomatic ties, but we have a lot of economic transactions, trade between two countries.
Yes.
So we also wish to establish, starting from trade first, to let each other to understand each other.
Of course.
Yeah.
And Mr. Yeh, let me ask you, some years ago when your parents decided to move, to emigrate, to Africa, it was a decision made by your parents.
Yeah.
But this time, when you decided to come back to Taiwan, it was a decision by you. Yeah. What were some of the considerations when you offered the position, to head up the trade investment and investment promotion, center?
Actually, I met my Director General, my boss right now in Mozambique. And then after some official visit come to Taiwan with him, I realized that there's a lot of cultural gap between Africa and Asia in general. And then people usually underestimate or they misunderstood African business culture, even government agencies. So my position, I act as a gateway because I possess both cultures as one.
Okay.
So
I would suppose that you have no immediate family here in Taiwan no more.
Actually, my grandparents they just came back.
back.
Yeah, they came back to Taiwan.
Okay, well, that certainly helps.
Yeah.
Certainly welcome you as a gateway, like you said, between Africa as a continent and also Taiwan. And Mr. Yeh, let's talk a little bit about Mozambique's economy. We've heard many wonderful stories about how Mozambique has become one of the fastest growing economies, if not the fastest growing economy in Africa in recent years. Would you mind elaborate on that and tell us what are the industries that have benefited the most, please?
Actually, it's not news that everybody knows that Mozambique as a country possesses a lot of natural resources, even from back in the days. But one of the reasons why within this recent 5 years especially, there's a huge boom in terms of Mozambican economy. It's number one, of course, is it's a natural gas discovery. And then the volume of natural gas discovered off the coast of Mozambique, it actually caused a major change in terms of the energy market in the world. Just to give like a worldview, just to sum up. This year we have witnessed the largest energy company merge in human history. And both of these two companies, their objective and then to merge is essentially human beings are transforming of the age of oil dependency onto gas.
Yes.
And then Mozambique's discovery of gas has actually changed a lot of in terms of energy markets. And then the excavation, extraction of gas and other minerals, including coal, one of the key for this boom is actually its government policies. Because if you think about it, it's only up to 1994 that the official civil war of Mozambique just ended. And its first president after the Civil War, His Excellency Joaquim Chissano, sorry, he actually won the Mo Ibrahim Award. That's the highest award given to an African leader in terms of taking the country from a post-war reconstruction into stabilizing the economy and also to attract foreign direct investments. And then obviously for any mega project, for big companies to invest in Mozambique, first thing is its political stability. Secondly, it's investment security, and also how to guarantee these securities in a foreign country. As we can see, a lot of these, the so-called the resource curse that happens in other countries in Middle East and North Africa, and also on the west coast of Africa, is being a very bad example for Africa in general. So Mozambique itself, we do not want to take the path that the other countries have taken.
Yes.
So Mozambique government are very keen on joining all the international norms in terms of signing a lot of agreements and try to manage its own resources. Because one of the biggest challenges in Africa today, not only Mozambique, but as a whole continent, is that how do we let the people to recognize the value of its own resources? And that's key, because most of the resources in Africa are mostly extractive. From the colonial era till now, it's a one-way road. It's just a resources extraction. Yes. There is no two ways, and there's no add value. No. So to the local economy, that's a very bad thing, because you're undermining development. So for Mozambique government, it's done taking a lot of essential steps in guaranteeing these resources are actually goes back to its people and add its own actual value and let people see the changes with their own eyes, so to speak. So there's actual physical changes in the economy, actually influencing the whole physical structure of the whole country. Okay. And then let me start with gas and mining business in Mozambique. Okay. By 2019, there'll be official gas production in Mozambique, and then it's about 180 trillion cubic feet of gas discovered just off the coast of Mozambique. And this accounts for, by 2025, this will be the third largest gas producing country in the world, just after Qatar and Australia. Okay. All right. So this volume of abundant gas resources means a lot, especially to Asia. Yeah. If you think about Taiwan, Japan, China, India, the need for gas. Yeah. Because the dependency on oil fluctuates, also dependence on the world political crisis. If you see it in an international perspective, it's a give and take. And this struggle has been going on for the past decade, since the Cold War till today. Yeah. And a lot of these large energy companies, they try to move on. And they've seen the discovery of gas in Mozambique have transformed the country itself, but also transformed the world economy in general. It really made quite a dent, quite an impression. And in terms of coal mining, if you think about how does coal sold to Asia, I mean, you have to cross the whole Indian Ocean. It's not really cost effective, you think, like its first impression, but the excavation cost and extraction cost for coal, especially coking coal in Mozambique, it's very low, because Mozambique is very fortunate. All the mineral deposits are on the surface.
Oh, really?
So actually, you don't need to dig like a very deep coal mine. You just essentially just sweep it off. Okay. And there's a lot of heavy sand mining, and also a lot of iron ore, rare earth, and a lot of other minerals. And then Mozambique is using this logistic advantage, because if you think about the whole Central Africa's mineral resources that's required by the world is actually exported through the coast of Mozambique. So during the colonial era, all the railways are going from east to west and west to east. There is no backbone in terms of going from north to south of Mozambique. Okay. And if you think about the whole country, it's about 2,750 kilometers long. Yes. And there's no actual railway going from north to south. And the only way to go there is by flying. Yes. And the government is in the recent years has spent a lot of efforts in doing infrastructures and building railroads, trying to connect the north to south. Okay. And then
that certainly is being very helpful, I would imagine. Yes. Yeah.
And then another very attractive industry for Mozambique is its marine resources. Yes. And then Taiwan, we know in Taiwan it's the third or the fourth largest fishing communities in the world. And then there's a lot of know-how and special knowledge of Taiwanese, the whole fishing industry, including fishing, packaging, transportation, logistics, distribution, marketing. And all these essentials are actually required by Mozambique, because in Mozambique, one of my earliest questions dealing with a Mozambican fishery is that how come we have such a long coastline and so much fishes in the ocean, but how come there is no fishing industry? And that's a really good question if you think about it. Right?
Yeah, a lot of people find that to be odd.
Yeah, yes. it's kind of an odd question. Yeah. And then I found out it's because there is so much resources available. So there is no actual competition that you have to go for all the resources in the water. Okay. The Mozambique Channel is the second deepest water in the world, just after Mariana Trench. Okay. So there's abundance of marine resources. And then my office will also assist in doing a lot of promotions in terms of establishing fishing industries in Mozambique, not only to come and procure licenses for license to fish for lucrative business like tuna, for example, but also to establish processing plants and also how to add value, for example, packaging. And Taiwan is one of the most advanced countries I've seen in terms of packaging, freezing, and then processing and distribution. And then recent years, especially within the past 2 years, the logistics in terms of shipping between Mozambique and Asia, especially to Taiwan, it's been, the prices are going down because number one is the drop in fuel prices. And number two is also there's more and more shipping routes being opened up between the two continents. And this is helping a lot for Mozambique in terms of transporting goods from two countries.
And Mr. Yeh, you also mentioned earlier that it's actually a two-way traffic, you know, in terms of trade investment. And may I ask, you know, according to your knowledge, and to the information that can be revealed to the public, what is the total volume of trade, approximately, between Mozambique and Taiwan?
There's a lot of procurement of coking coal for steel refinery from Mozambique. And then Mozambique also, on year 2013, on my first year of appointment, there's a big procurement also on diesel and benzene in terms of fuel, because Mozambique is not an oil-producing country. So we buy a lot of fuel from abroad, especially for our mining projects. And then I can say the volume is quite considerable.
I would imagine. And finally, before we end this part of the program, Mr. Yeh, can you tell us, if I were a Taiwanese businessman looking to invest overseas to Mozambique, what can you tell me is the most attractive part about investments in Mozambique?
Actually, Mozambique, there is no restrictions on financial transactions. And there is no restrictions on, there is no obligation to have local hire. So you can have 100% foreign-owned company operating in Mozambique. And there is no restrictions on currency exchange, for example. And then a lot of laws, protection laws, especially on dealing with financial legal issues, can be settled overseas.
Oh, really?
So there's a lot of outsourced agencies, international well-known agencies that a lot of these big multi-million-dollar business operates. And they find it more easy also. And then from the government side, there's a lot of outsourcing too, in terms of, for example, auditing assessments and then inspections and so forth. So we try to facilitate foreign direct investment as easy as possible. And that's one of the main goals of this office.
Based on your experience, Mr. Yeh, how big is the Taiwanese community or Chinese community at large in Mozambique? Are you talking about people in the hundreds? And for example, if I make an investment in Mozambique and one day I'm craving for Taiwanese food, do you have a good Chinese or Taiwanese restaurant there?
There's a considerable amount of Chinese people living in Mozambique, also large Japanese community, Koreans too. But I'm still working on attracting Taiwanese people going there. But there's been a lot of, it's a mix of food culture. There's Asian, Malay, Indo cuisine, and there's a lot of Indian influence too. And then there's Japanese restaurants, there's a Korean restaurant, and there's several Chinese restaurants. And they do quite
pretty
preparations
authentic.
For authentic also for seafood too, because we have abundance of seafood.
Mr. Yeh, thank you for the very comprehensive introduction about the Mozambique state of economy today. And a lot of people would, also ask you that, Mr. Yeh, if I want to go ahead and invest in Mozambique, I want to know about the local culture. I want to know how the people is like. Are they receptive, friendly to foreign visitors, and what is the for example, any vestige from the colonial years on the Portuguese, and how would I, in addition to English, how can I master another language, maybe to overcome some of the obstacles? Please.
Actually, there's still some Portuguese influence in Mozambique, but this if you think about Africa, you have to also understand its colonial history. Because the Portuguese colonies are very different from the British or the French.
The Spanish, yes.
Because Portuguese colonies, they don't have forced segregation between racial differences. So it's a very incorporating culture. So even after the colonial period, there's still a lot of Portuguese people living in Mozambique, and they still live in harmony. There's a lot of Brazilian immigrants also, a lot of Indians. Because if you think about the location of Mozambique on the Indian Ocean, it's very close to India, Madagascar, Mauritius, and the Reunion Islands. So there's a lot of Indo-Malay influence. The earliest of days, the first encounter with the Chinese was Zheng He. He actually went to the port of Beira. That's from a long time ago, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and there's a very old Chinese community too. That's it's in Mozambique from back in the days where they start growing spices and trades. It's in the east coast of Mozambique.
Over the years, have you seen that with the transformation of the economy, have you seen the local attitudes towards the society, towards people, like foreign visitors, change over the time? You know, are they looking to be more open up, even more than before, you know, to foreign direct investment? Please.
If you're speaking about the capital in Maputo, there's a huge change because there's a growing amount of middle class. And there's a lot of foreigners on the streets. And then a very good indicator from one of my past experiences bringing a Taiwanese delegation to Mozambique was that they were very surprised. Like after dinner, around 10:30 at night, you can see clubs and bars and restaurants and cafes and full of foreigners. Just chilling, having a couple of drinks and so forth. So the vibe is very relaxed and laid back.
Good.
And then in general, it's a very welcoming, friendly atmosphere. And we don't have any resentment against foreigners. Because there's actual change, physical change. You can see cranes everywhere around the city. There's a lot of constructions going on. A lot of foreign companies stationed in, a lot of foreign hire, local hire. So there's a lot of job opportunities. And one of the significant things, actually I didn't really notice, was that from my past experience, I have a friend coming from Taiwan to visit Mozambique, and he was very surprised because we went to the central train station, and he was surprised to see people queuing up. He's saying that your people are very disciplined. You can see from people queuing on the bus station, they're very well-mannered. And they dress very formal. Because during the Portuguese colonial era, I think it's a culture of etiquette that still remains in a lot of Mozambique cultures. And although the local have a lot of local cultures, but it's kind of a mixed fusion. And then in general, for foreign investors, they find Maputo, the city, people are very friendly, and then there's a lot of mixed, diverse cultures. And then just to give an example of how many foreigners living in the city, we have American school, Portuguese school, South African school, French school, and then there's even a Swedish school. So there's a huge expat community living in Mozambique, and there's a lot of famous people living in Mozambique too.
For example?
For example, a lot of famous writers, playwrights, or they live in Mozambique, and then they travel back and forward. So it's a very international city.
I would imagine even more people, you know, that go to Mozambique as a vacation spot. And let me ask you a little bit about the education system, because if I were to invest in Mozambique, my family is going to move with me, and I want to make sure that my kids are going to, you know, good schools out there. Please.
There's an American school. You have the American primary school to IB. So that's high levels. And you also have the international school, which is HIGCSE system. And then you also have the Portuguese school. So there's many school systems which to choose from. So it's so it's quite it's quite convenient also for a lot of kids coming from overseas, and the parents that work in Mozambique, and then they just go there, and then they can fit in really well.
And what's the official language for Mozambique?
Official language is Portuguese. But for most
English can
get by on most younger people and older generations, because during the Civil War, a lot of Mozambicans actually went overseas. And then after the war finished, they came back to Mozambique. So a lot of them are, for example, my colleagues, they're Mozambican, African, but they speak Chinese. because they graduate from Wuhan University or someone from Sichuan, and then now they're all working with me together in CPI.
Okay, good. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about tourism. Even though Mr. Yeh, I've never been to Mozambique, but I can imagine just from talking with you, it's a beautiful country. And like you said, it has a long coastline. You know, as a matter of fact, I think it's over 2,750 kilometers long. So you have, you know, a lot of, I would imagine, unspoiled beaches, you know, which is something that a lot of the vacationers are looking for. So let's talk a little bit about the tourism.
Tourism industry in Mozambique is very undermined because, number one, it's a lot of people only know about South Africa or Kenya or Botswana in terms of vacations.
Okay.
Because the only thing about Mozambique is a beach, is a huge beach resort.
Yes.
But if you think about the beach, it's very long, like you've mentioned. It's 2,750 kilometers.
Yes.
So even by flying from the capital to the north of Mozambique takes 3 hours with the Airbus. And a lot of these destinations are very exclusive. And then they are private chalets or resorts. And then they're operated by big international companies. And then actually last year, November, Mozambique was participated in the International Travel Fair for the first time in Taipei, for the ITF.
Good.
And then we were very welcomed by the Taiwanese tourism operators. And then they were very surprised because they found out that the tourists, they don't have group packages.
Okay.
Because if you think about Taiwanese tour operators, usually your first impression of going on a tour, you have like 20, 30 people companions. But for Mozambique, it's very exclusive private holidays. Yes. And it's very different from other African countries because Mozambique possesses both safari and the beach. So it's a paradise for fishing. If you're a fishing guru, please come to Mozambique because you can catch any all the fishes you want. You can imagine, actually. Okay. And if you're into scuba diving, there's places in Inhambane, in Tofu, Vilankulos, where there's a lot of whale shark sightings. Okay. It's one of the highest rate of sightings for whale sharks in the world, even more than Indonesia if you want to go see a whale shark. Okay. And then there's a good place for sailing, for example, a lot of water sports. Yes. And then for safaris, we share the border with South Africa. So we actually co-share the Kruger National Park. Oh, yeah. So part of the Kruger National Park belongs to Mozambique. Okay. And is together with South Africa. And then this national park, the land area is actually bigger than Taiwan. Yes. So to go around the park, driving around, actually takes 4 days. Yes. So, and you can go through all the terrains and see different environments and different climates and so forth. It's quite an amazing place. Okay. And then for Taiwanese tourists, I recommend you have to take at least a week to 2 week trip to Mozambique because you not only have to stay in the capital, to enjoy the international vibe and also the business and all the vibes and going on for investment, but also get to see other places, like in the north. And there's a UNESCO site called the Ilium Mozambique. Yes, yes. And that's one of the famous transaction ports for slavery back in the days on East Coast Africa. It's the same like in the one in Senegal. And there's the Bazarutu island chains. If you look at the pictures, those things are like heaven on earth, so to speak, because like you said, it's unspoiled beaches. And then a lot of beaches are actually virgin beaches. Nobody's ever been there. Because some places you go, there's 50-kilometer radius, you don't find a single human being. It's just pure wild nature. And that's one of the real places you want to escape from civilization. There's no cell phone signals. There's nothing. Just you and nature, so to speak. Of course. So it's a great...
it's a total escape.
Yes, it's a total escape, yeah. And then it's very attractive to a lot of Europeans and American... for example, it's a lot of tourists coming in. And then this year we try to attract tourists from Taiwan. Yes. And we have a lot of Japanese and Korean tourists, independent tourists. And then they were very surprised because... for CPI, we receive a lot of official trade delegations for business. And during these conferences, we always try to organize at least 2 days or 1 day, so get to see other places in Mozambique. Of course. Like, for example, the beach. And then soon after 2 months, you see them come with the whole family.
Yes.
And they say, oh, Mozambique is such a nice place. And then it's friendly people. Yeah. And then the resorts are very exclusive. You don't have a lot of neighbors. There is no huge buffet tables with like people queuing up for buffets. It's you feel very special in Mozambique.
Okay, good. All right. Certainly, if I got 2 weeks coming up in my vacation time, Mozambique will be right up there as the destination. But when you talk about promotion of tourism, you have to necessarily discuss what are some of the transportation links available. We understand that Mozambique is far, and can you tell us that what are some of the readily available flying routes and airlines that can offer for tourists in Taiwan who are interested to go into your beautiful country? Please.
Okay. Let me start with the easiest and the fastest routes.
Okay.
That's Taipei, Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong to Johannesburg.
Okay.
It's about 11-hour flight, 12 hours.
Altogether?
Altogether, yeah.
Okay.
And then from Johannesburg to Maputo, Mozambique, it's about 40 minutes flight.
Okay.
So it's quite a short journey, so to speak. And there's another longer way, which is Taipei, Dubai, Dubai, Johannesburg, Johannesburg, Mozambique. Or you fly from Taipei, Hong Kong, Hong Kong, Doha, Doha to Mozambique. And then there's another more direct flight from Europe that's from Portugal, from Lisbon to Maputo, to capital. There's direct flights, a couple of flights a week. And then in the very near future, there's a brand new international airport opening up in the north of Mozambique in the city called Nacala.
Okay.
And this airport can host all the major airlines.
Okay.
So there's been discussions. There's Turkish Airlines coming in. There's Southern China Airlines coming in. And then there's a lot of flights coming to Asia and so forth. And then this will be the hub, so to speak, on the east coast of Africa.
Okay.
And for traveling by land, so to speak, for example, the capital of Mozambique, Maputo, is in the south, very near south. And then it's right at the border between Swaziland and South Africa. So it's about a 3-hour drive. So you can actually fly to South Africa and actually drive back to Mozambique. Or you can drive through Swaziland and come to Mozambique. So my recommendation for tourists to come, a lot of European and American packages, they come for like a month, so to speak. And then they do 3 countries. For example, they come down to Kenya around August to see the Serengeti, to see the big migration of animals. The mass migration in August, Serengeti. And then they come down to Mozambique to the beach. And then they fly down to South Africa, and then go from South Africa down to Cape Town. So you can have a both taste of the surf and turf, so to speak. You have the beach and then you have the land. And then you get to see 3 or 4 different countries. And then from the other side, from the west coast side, you can come in from Europe down to Johannesburg and then go through Botswana. There's another very famous mass animal migration in Okavango Valley. And then from there, you can go up north to Zimbabwe, Zambia, get to see the Victoria Falls. And then from there, they go to Mozambique again to go to the beaches. And then come down to South Africa again, and then via back to Europe. So there's a lot of combinations, different routes. And then the local tour operators in Mozambique, they do mostly customized trips. Depends on your preference. So there is no fixed schedule. So a lot of people, they want to see 4 or 5 countries in a very short period of time. They can do it too, and they're very professional. A lot of English tour guides. And then now they're seeking for Chinese or Japanese speaking tour guides because we have more and more. Demand is rising. So we also wish to push more tourists coming in. And then I have some lot of information for tourists in my office. So if anybody's interested coming to Mozambique for holidays, you can contact me in my office.
Terrific. And also another thing that tourists will ask that, Mr. Yeh, is it very expensive to go to your country? We know the flight may cost a little more, but how about the local expenses?
Actually, you'll be very surprised because in the capital city, Maputo, for example, food and hotel, it's more expensive than Taipei.
Of course.
Because a lot of foreign direct investment and a lot of
foreign visitors,
and there's a high demand. So this is kind of something we try to work on to bring in the whole package of flights coming in, because we still have a lot of competition, to be honest. For example, Mauritius, Maldives, all these island chains. Yeah. But in Mozambique, in Africa, you get a different taste, which is not only typical touristy places to go, but it's something essentially something new. Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then one thing I like to stress is the food. Okay. We are very fortunate living in Mozambique. The food we eat every day is, for us, is normal. But for a lot of Taiwanese people that come to Mozambique, the first impression, they'll be like, wow, like this vegetable, it's so tasty. You know, it's very organic, it's very fresh, because there is no fertilizer, there's no pesticide. So there's no issues with food security in Africa, so to speak. And there's abundance of seafood. And then the seafood from the Indian Ocean are very different from Taiwan. And then the preparation is also very different. And in Mozambique, unlike other African countries, our cuisine, it's a mix of fusion culture. We have lots of curries, for example, from the Indian influence, and we use a lot of spices. And then a lot of olive oil, lots of...
very healthy.
Yeah, very typical spices from Portugal. A lot of different pastries, for example. Okay. And then I understand that in Taiwan, people are very obsessed with food. Yeah. You know, in Taiwan, we have a good saying, say people here probably they live to eat. And then for us in Africa, we eat to live. You know, it's a different mentality.
Yeah, of course.
So that's one thing my office and my whole African group here in Taiwan, we try to work on, is how to attract Taiwanese tourists through the taste buds, so to speak, to satisfy the stomach first. Yeah.
Yes. After learning so much about your beautiful country, that Mr. Yeh, we understand that your office plays a pivotal role in terms of promoting not only tourism but also investment and trade. Can you then tell us, in the last 2 to 3 years, what were some of the major activities that have already been done by your office, and what are some of the major activities that you have planned for this year, 2015? Please.
We hosted a very successful fishery delegation to Taiwan. We have our government officials from the fishery ministry. And then in Taiwan also to tell the Taiwanese fishery community to understand the legal issues to fish in Mozambique waters. And also to provide Taiwanese people with a lot of opportunities, because the fishing industry in Taiwan is very competitive. And then the fishing grounds are getting less and less, and they need to find a new place. And then secondly, my office also, we participated in the International Tourism Fair. That's another thing, we bring some tourists in. So that's fishery and tourism. And then we also do a lot of business seminars, introducing focus groups in terms of, I do a lot of presentations on SMEs, for example, small, medium enterprise. But also I do a lot of presentations on gas and minerals and mining and industries. And then also a lot of presentations on, in general, for example, culture. And then I also did some presentations not only in universities, but also in primary schools and high schools. Cool. Because we want to attract the kids' interest in terms of with nature, for example, and also to understand African culture. Because my office, I realize, is one obstacle I have to overcome, is how to overcome the bias of Taiwanese people against Africa. Because a lot of tourists say, this year I'm not going to Africa because of Ebola. But that's really far away. That's in northwest Africa. It's super far away from Mozambique. So people also have to understand, when you cross the border, you speak a different language. It's a totally different people. And then this is something we really have to work hard on. And then so I focus a lot on my, not only my students here in Taiwan, my Mozambican students, but also other students from African countries. We use them as a gateway to promote African value and also to have better knowledge about Africa towards Taiwanese people. And I believe this is eventually a mutual learning progress. Because for us coming to Taiwan, we learn a lot. Honestly, we really learn a lot. But for Taiwanese coming to Africa, it's a totally different life experience.
And in terms of the lack of understanding for most Taiwanese towards Africa and including Mozambique, what would be some of the things, since you are a product of biculture, two cultures that you're exposed to and you know both of them Very well. What would be some of the things, based on your years of growing up in Africa and also now work experience in Taiwan and in Asia? What would be some of the things that you think we all can do together to try to break those stereotypes?
I think one thing is the language barrier. For example, one thing that's faced by a lot of African students here is that they have to integrate their society.
Yeah.
They have to integrate themselves in society to assimilate into the culture.
Okay.
But also in the same time, the Taiwanese are very friendly, extremely friendly. And then we are very grateful even for our students to come and adapt very easily here.
Yes.
So one of the obstacles is also maybe we can overcome through community service. For example, we try to organize sport events.
Yes.
For example, soccer between our African teams and with the university teams here in Taiwan. And also a lot of municipal programs. That's why this year, my African group were also very honored to visit a lot of mayors in Taiwan. We try to approach the municipality education departments and also for social working departments. So we try to promote our students to participate, for example, in public sport events, for example, marathons, or like a charity runs, or some cultural festivals. It's an integration on both sides, and then there's a lot of progress been done so far.
Yes, so, and certainly, Mr. Yeh, you play a very important role in terms of bridging the differences and also promote the opportunities on both sides for the people in both countries. And thank you very much, Mr. Yeh, for being a special guest on Taiwan Outlook today. Certainly, I personally included have benefited so much from your conversation and introduction of Mozambique as a beautiful country. Yes, want to wish you all the best in your future personal and professional endeavors. I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching our program today. I'll see you next time on MacroView Television. Thank you.